It started with a storm, a quiet street, 5 tattooed men, and a woman screaming in the rain until a single dad slammed on the brakes and changed everything. He thought it was just a moment of courage. She knew it was the moment that would unravel secrets, test hearts, and bring a helicopter to his doorstep by morning. What he didn't expect, that saving her life would bring him back to his own. The rain came down like it had a score to settle. Ethan Cole tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his rusted Ford pickup, the wipers struggling against the downpour. Neon signs blurred behind streams of water on the windshield. Lighthouse Diner open late. It was past 11 p.m., and the streets of Millersville were mostly deserted, save for the occasional flicker of light from an upstairs apartment or the warm yellow glow of the diner. He wasn't supposed to be out this late. Lila had finally fallen asleep after another bad dream, something about wolves and sirens. He had slipped out quietly, just a quick drive to clear his head, maybe circle back with a cup of coffee for the morning. Being a single father came with its rituals. Quiet drives were one of them. But then he saw her. At the edge of the alley near the diner, 5 figures loomed like shadows, pulling towards something. No someone at the center. A woman. Young. Soaked. Cornered. Ethan's instincts clicked in before logic could form. The tires screeched as he jerked the truck into a sharp stop. He threw the door open, boots splashing into a puddle rain slicing across his face. One of the men turned. Tattoos curled down his neck like oil stains. "Keep walking, man," he growled. But Ethan had already closed the truck door behind him. He didn't speak. Words would waste time. The first man lunged. Ethan stepped sideways, grabbed his wrist, and used the man's momentum to throw him against the wet brick wall with a sickening thud. Another attacker rushed in with a chain in hand. Ethan ducked low, swept the man's legs, and the chain clattered on the pavement. The third came with a swing. Ethan blocked, countered jab to the ribs, then an elbow to the jaw. Fast, controlled. The fourth and fifth hesitated. The woman, her coat-torn hair drenched, stood frozen, eyes wide behind rain-speckled lashes. Her lips trembled, but she didn't scream. "Get her out of here," one of the men shouted, but the fifth took one look at Ethan, who now stood tall in the center of the street. Sleeves rolled up, soaked green jacket clinging to his frame, steam rising from his breath, and ran. The others followed. Ethan turned toward the woman, chest heaving. "You all right?" he asked, voice steady like the rain hadn't even touched him. She nodded, but her knees buckled. Ethan stepped forward just in time to catch her before she hit the ground. "I think I just need to sit. Somewhere dry." He helped her to the passenger side of his truck, grabbed a dry blanket from the back and gently wrapped it around her. She clutched it like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "I'm Ethan," he said, as he started the engine again. "Laura," she whispered. Laura Hayes. Back at the cabin, the storm still raged, but inside everything was soft and quiet. Ethan stoked the fire while Laura sat curled up on the couch in one of Lila's oversized hoodies. The room smelled of cedarwood rain and faint traces of peppermint from a forgotten candle. A teapot whistled in the kitchen. She held the mug like it was made of glass. "You didn't have to stop," she said quietly. "Most people wouldn't. I'm not most people." There was no arrogance in his voice, just fact. The flame cast dancing shadows on the family photo above the mantel. A younger Ethan stood beside a smiling woman with dark curls, holding a baby girl between them. Laura followed his gaze. She was beautiful. She was, Ethan replied. Lila's mom. Cancer. It's been 4 years now. Laura nodded, absorbing the silence. "I wasn't expecting company," Ethan added with a wry smile. Laura chuckled, the sound breaking the tension like a fragile vase shattering into light. "I wasn't expecting to nearly be mugged in a town like this." Ethan looked at her eyes, narrowing slightly. What were you doing out there? Her smile faded just a fraction, trying to disappear, I guess. He didn't press. The way she hugged the blanket tighter told him that story could wait. Instead, he said, "You're safe now." Outside, the rain began to ease, drumming softer against the roof. Laura stared at the fire, her voice barely a whisper. "You didn't even hesitate." Ethan stood. "I've seen worse than 5 idiots in the rain. Some of us don't get the luxury of hesitation." He disappeared briefly into the back room, returned with a dry blanket and some folded clothes. "Bathroom's down the hall. Get some rest. The storm will pass by morning." She looked at him. Really looked this time. "Thank you, Ethan." He gave her a simple nod, the kind that meant more than a speech. Then he turned and walked to his room, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone by the fire, Laura let her hand rest on the edge of the blanket fingertips, grazing the hem as her eyes drifted to the photo again. The marine emblem on the corner of the frame. The look in Ethan's eyes as he fought without hesitation. He wasn't just kind. He was dangerous, yes, but safe. Strong, but not showy. Protective, without demanding anything in return. She wasn't sure yet who Ethan Cole really was, but she already knew one thing for certain. This man had just changed the course of her life. The storm had quieted to a hush, like even the rain had run out of things to say. Ethan stood by the window, arms crossed, his silhouette cut against the pale dawn. Beyond the glass, the forest shimmered in the aftermath of night's fury, pine branches dripping with silver, a world washed clean. From behind him came the soft rustle of movement. Laura appeared at the doorway to the kitchen, still wrapped in Lila's hoodie sleeves, far too long for her arms. Her wet clothes were drying near the hearth, steam rising from the folded denim like breath. "I didn't mean to fall asleep," she said, rubbing her temple. "I haven't slept that soundly in a long time." "You needed it," Ethan replied without turning. "Sleep's the first thing to leave when the world goes sideways." She stepped closer, drawn to the faint smell of brewing coffee. "You always this calm, even after you take down 5 street thugs in the middle of a thunderstorm." Ethan glanced over his shoulder, the corners of his mouth twitching into a quiet smile. "I'm better with chaos than with conversation." Laura let out a soft laugh. "Well, I guess we make a good pair. I'm worse with both." He poured 2 cups and handed her one, their fingers grazing briefly. She noticed the calluses on his hands that had clearly known hard work, discipline, and loss. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, the kind that had seen years of use and still held warmth in its grain. Laura traced a chip on the ceramic mug absently. "This place," she said, eyes wandering to the photos lining the wall. The coat rack by the door with only 2 hooks in use. "It feels like it has stories." "It does," Ethan said. "Most of them are quiet. Some still hurt." He gestured toward the largest picture on the shelf. It was a candid shot, his late wife laughing, wind in her hair, Lila clinging to her shoulders mid-laugh. Her name was Emily. She was my lighthouse. Laura swallowed. "I'm sorry." Ethan nodded, eyes softening. "Cancer doesn't care how strong you are. It takes what it wants and leaves silence in its place." They sat in that silence for a moment. Not awkward, just honest. "She'd like you," Ethan added unexpectedly. Emily could read people. "Said kindness wasn't something you said, it was how you sat with someone when they're hurting." Laura blinked. "That sounds like something a poet would say." "She had a way," he said quietly. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, golden light pouring in through the window panes like gentle forgiveness. The morning was beginning again. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Ethan looked at her. "You tell me. I've got a second cup of coffee, one extra blanket, and a little girl who'll be up soon demanding pancakes. You're welcome to stay until you figure out your next step." She hesitated. "And you don't want to know who I am." Why I was out there, his expression didn't change. "If you want to tell me, you will. If not, well, you're not the only person who needed to vanish for a night." Laura exhaled deeply like she hadn't in months. "I'll help with pancakes," she said, "but I burn toast, so consider yourself warned." By the time Lila wandered into the kitchen in fuzzy socks and a sleepy scowl, the smell of pancakes had filled the cabin. She blinked at Laura, then looked to her father. "Daddy." "It's okay," Ethan said, crouching beside her. "She's a friend. She needed a warm place to stay." Lila looked up at Laura for a long moment, then walked over, tugged at the sleeve of the hoodie, and asked softly, "Did the rain make you cry?" Laura knelt down, slowly. "Maybe. But your dad helped me feel safe again." Lila studied her, like only a child could, then reached into her tiny robe pocket and pulled out a crumpled drawing stick figures under a rainbow. One tall, with a beard, one small, with braids, and one with yellow hair. "This was me, Daddy, and Mama. You can be in it too if you want." Laura stared at the drawing, her lip trembling. She touched Lila's cheek. "I'd be honored." Ethan turned away for a moment, pretending to stir syrup, just to keep from losing composure. Later dishes done and fire rekindled, Laura wandered back into the living room. She stood before the photo of Emily, again, this time, looking longer, deeper. She really was beautiful, she said. She was fierce too, Ethan added from behind. Didn't tolerate liars, cowards, or underseasoned chili. Laura smiled. Smart woman. He stepped beside her. "I don't usually bring people here. Not since... well, you're the first. That sounds like trust," she whispered. "It is." She turned to face him. "What if I told you that I wasn't who I appeared to be? That maybe the people you fought off weren't just random thugs, but part of something bigger?" Ethan didn't flinch. "Then I'd say you just made me more curious, not less trusting." Laura studied him. "Why, because when I found you, you were scared, not dangerous. And scared people don't fake the way you held that blanket like it was a lifeline." She blinked, stunned. "You're not just calm. You're observant. I was trained to see what matters." Their eyes held for a moment. The fire crackled behind them. Rain had stopped, but something warmer lingered in the air, trust beginning to take root like spring after a long winter. "I'll tell you everything," she said quietly. "But not yet." Ethan nodded. "Whenever you're ready." The morning was supposed to be peaceful. Birds had just begun their tentative songs, and the forest outside Ethan's cabin rustled softly, as if shaking off the storm's memory. The scent of pine needles and cooling earth drifted through the open kitchen window. Lila sat on the couch, humming to herself, coloring a new picture, while Ethan stirred oatmeal on the stove. Laura, freshly showered and wearing borrowed flannel, had just poured herself a second cup of coffee. She leaned against the counter, watching father and daughter interact, quiet exchanges, tender in their simplicity. She didn't speak much, but her smile had changed. It was less guarded now, as though something in her had loosened. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not wind. A deep mechanical whirring, low at first, then rising into a thundering crescendo that made the windows tremble in their frames. Ethan stiffened. The spoon paused mid-stir. Lila's crayon rolled off the table. Laura set down her mug, eyes wide. "That's a chopper," Ethan said, already moving toward the front door. The familiar weight returned to his stance, feet grounded, eyes narrowed, hand instinctively hovering near the belt loop, where in another life a sidearm would have hung. Marine instincts didn't fade. They just slept. The sound grew louder. Wind kicked up outside, dry leaves spiraling into the air. The trees swayed, and from above the treetops, the sleek black frame of a helicopter broke through the morning light circling the cabin once before, hovering above the clearing in front of the house. The massive rotors sent a storm of pine needles scattering across the yard. Dust swirled, branches trembled. The grass bent beneath the fury of its downwash. Lila clutched Laura's arm, frightened. "Daddy, what's happening?" Ethan didn't answer. He stepped out onto the porch, shielding his eyes as the chopper began its descent. Laura followed slowly, her hair whipping in the wind, her jaw clenched. Her expression no longer held confusion, it held recognition. As the skids touched ground, a side door slid open. Out stepped two men in crisp black suits, sunglasses on despite the morning haze. Behind them, a third figure remained seated inside, still hidden from view. Ethan Cole, one of the men, called over the rotor noise. Ethan didn't move. "Who's asking?" "We're with the Everhart security group," the man shouted. "We're here for Ms. Laura Hayes." Ethan's eyes darted sideways. Laura stood very still. Her hands were at her sides. Her lips parted, but she didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked resigned. "I'm sorry," she said softly, not to the men but to Ethan. He blinked. "You knew they'd come. I wasn't sure how fast," she said. But yes. Lila had stepped onto the porch, now standing beside her father, holding onto his sleeve. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice low and even. Not angry, just measured. Controlled. The way someone spoke when something cracked inside but hadn't yet broken. Laura looked at him, then really looked, and something in her face, regret, maybe even shame, melted into resolve. She walked forward, slow and deliberate, past the men in suits, and climbed into the helicopter. Ethan watched her disappear behind the tinted doors. One of the agents turned to him again. "She left this for you." He held out a small, sealed envelope. Ethan didn't take it immediately. When he finally did, the paper felt heavier than it should. The name written on the front was in soft cursive Ethan. The agent nodded, once, then turned and stepped back into the chopper. Moments later, the rotors roared to life again. The wind rose once more. Lila buried her face in Ethan's side. Together they stood and watched the helicopter rise into the sky and vanish over the tree line. Inside, the silence was oppressive. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, the envelope untouched. He stared at it like it might detonate. Lila was curled on the couch watching him. Her crayon lay forgotten in her lap. "You okay, Daddy?" she asked gently. "I don't know," he replied. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Just one page. "Ethan, I never intended to deceive you. That night, I wasn't running from something. I was trying to remember who I used to be before everything became noise. You gave me something no one else has in years' safety without expectation. I am Laura Hayes. My family runs Everhart Global. I'm not just part of it, I'm heir to it. And that title, that world, it's suffocating sometimes. I needed a night outside of it. Just one. A moment where I wasn't being handled, protected, or judged. You gave me that. But now I have to return to a life that I don't fully belong to anymore. If you're angry, I understand. But if you ever want to know why I came back into your life in the first place, or why I'll try to come back again, look for the second letter. There will be one. With gratitude, Laura." Ethan stared at the paper. Not with anger. Not even with betrayal. Just silence. Then he slowly folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and looked out the window. The sky was clear now. Not a single cloud. The kind of morning that tried to pretend nothing extraordinary had just happened. But something had. Something that had changed everything. The first thing Ethan noticed was how quiet helicopters were on the inside. Not the machine itself, its rotors still thundered above, slicing through air with unrelenting force. But the cabin. It was insulated, muted, like the world outside had been shut out completely, just the way powerful people liked it. He sat stiffly, arms crossed across from Laura. Her posture was poised, but not cold, the tension in her shoulders betraying her calm facade. Between them sat a small chrome table untouched, a tray of untouched lemon water and folded napkins balanced neatly on top. Too perfect. She broke the silence first. "I didn't think you'd agree to come." Ethan hadn't. Not at first. But something about the envelope, her words had dug into him. Not just the mystery, but the honesty inside it. "I don't like loose ends," he said flatly. Laura met his gaze. Her eyes were clearer now, no longer fogged by fear or exhaustion. She looked composed, different, or maybe just fully herself. "Fair," she said. "You deserve to know the truth. All of it." Ethan didn't nod. He waited. The chopper banked gently as it climbed above a bank of clouds, the cabin lights flickering with the shift in altitude. Through the tinted window, he could see the curvature of land far below forests and fields laid out like a forgotten map. "I wasn't lying when I said I needed to disappear." That night, Laura began, voice low but firm. "But I wasn't running from an abusive ex or hiding from enemies. I was escaping a boardroom." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Boardroom?" "I'm the executive chair of Everhart Global," she said, pausing just a beat to let the name sink in. "My father built it. My mother's family owned half of Silicon Valley before anyone knew what a startup was." She watched his face closely, expecting something: disbelief, admiration, maybe even bitterness. But Ethan's expression barely changed, just a slight crease in his brow. "Tech company," he said. "I've heard the name. We're more than that. Now," she replied, a touch wry. "Medical AI, aerospace, renewable energy, every sector that makes headlines. And I'm expected to lead it into the next generation." And yet, Ethan said slowly, "You were walking alone at night, near a rundown diner. No security, no driver, no freedom," she corrected. "That night was the first time in years I could just breathe." The silence between them pulsed with unspoken weight. "I wasn't supposed to be there," she added. "I left the gala early, ditched the car 2 blocks from the hotel. I just wanted a milkshake and a moment. I thought Millersville would be quiet. No press, no pressure. Instead, you got jumped." Laura gave a short, rueful laugh. "Yeah, so much for instincts." Ethan leaned back slightly. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" She looked down, then back up. "Because you didn't treat me like everyone else. You didn't look at me and see dollar signs or headlines. You didn't ask questions, you just helped." "I don't rescue people for payment." "I know," she said softly. "That's what scared me the most." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked out the window again, his reflection faint in the glass. "I've spent years watching people pretend," she continued. "Pretend to care, pretend to admire me, pretend to support my decisions, when all they really want is influence, control, or a piece of the inheritance. And what do you think I want?" She shook her head. "That's just it. I don't think you want anything from me." Ethan said nothing. Laura leaned forward, voice gentler now. "But I want something from you." He turned, met her eyes again. "I want to give back what you gave me," she said. "You didn't ask for anything. But that's exactly why I want to help. I don't need a handout. This isn't charity." "Then what is it?" She hesitated, searching for the words. "A second chance," she said. "For both of us." The helicopter jolted slightly as it descended, the pilot's voice cutting through the silence over the intercom. ETA 3 minutes. Through the window, Ethan could now see the outline of a rooftop landing pad, a glass skyscraper looming like a cathedral above the city. Sleek, modern, cold. "This is your world," he said. his voice neutral. Laura looked at him. It's not the world I want to stay trapped in. For the first time, Ethan let himself truly study her past, the wealth past the guarded posture. She was strong, yes, but also tired. And underneath it all, lonely in a way he recognized too well. You don't owe me anything, Laura, I know she said quietly, but I owe myself the truth. And that truth is, I felt more alive in your kitchen with a cup of bad coffee and a little girl's drawing than I've felt in 10 years of board meetings. The landing gear extended. The helicopter's rotors began to slow. We're not the same, Ethan said. No, she replied. We're not, but we're both carrying things we haven't put down in years. The door slid open. Bright sunlight spilled into the cabin. Laura stepped out first, her frame silhouetted against the skyline. But before she disappeared into the building, she turned back to Ethan. I'm not done with this story, she said. And I hope you're not either. He didn't answer. Not with words. But something in his stance softened just a little. Then she was gone. And Ethan was left in the cabin holding a truth he hadn't asked for, and wondering why it didn't make him walk away. The world below shrank into a miniature. From this height, the streets were no longer filled with people and stories. They were just patterns, quiet, colorless, far away. Like a life that once mattered, but not anymore. Ethan sat back in the leather seat of the helicopter, watching the land pass beneath them, arms folded. His marine jacket zipped halfway up, despite the temperature-controlled cabin. It wasn't the cold he was bracing for. It was what Laura was about to say next. Across from him, Laura pulled off the sleek black blazer one of her assistants had handed her upon boarding. She looked uncomfortable in it anyway. Beneath it, she wore a pale blue blouse, sleeves rolled, collar loose. Her hair was tied back, but a few strands framed her face as the wind from the closing hatch rustled them free. Sorry about the dramatics, she said, half smiling, trying to lighten the silence between them. Wasn't supposed to happen like that. Ethan gave a small shake of his head. Helicopters and suits aren't my thing. I'm a Ford pickup kind of guy, I noticed, she said with a gentle smile. That's why I trusted you. He looked at her. Now, really looked the way he might have studied someone before stepping into a mission. Not just for weakness, but for intent. You don't strike me as someone who trusts easily, he said. I don't. Her voice was quieter now. But that night, I was tired of being Laura Hayes. I just wanted to be someone no one expected anything from. Someone who could be scared and vulnerable without the whole world watching. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. And now, she said slowly, I think it's time you knew what that name means. She reached into the compartment beneath her seat and pulled out a black leather portfolio. Unsnapping it, she laid it open on the table between them. Inside was a photo, an older man with steel gray hair, standing in front of a wall of screens and data projections. Beside him was Laura, younger, smiling but guarded. My father, Thomas Hayes, founder of Everhart Global. He built the company out of a garage in San Jose before Silicon Valley was called Silicon Valley. He passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry, Ethan said. She nodded. He was brilliant. But he was also demanding. He had this vision, this idea that I could be more than just a figurehead. He raised me like a CEO in training since I was 12. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. That's not childhood. That's boot camp. A flash of amusement touched her eyes. Exactly. She closed the portfolio. After he passed, I inherited controlling interest in the company, along with the board's scrutiny, media attention, and every cousin investor and opportunist in the family tree suddenly remembering I existed. And you didn't want the spotlight. I didn't mind leading. I minded being caged in it. Ethan nodded, understanding more than he let on. So, the walk in the rain. Laura glanced out the window, then back. I wanted to know who I was when no one knew who I was. He didn't respond right away. Then, with measured calm, he asked, "And did you find her?" Her eyes flickered. I found someone who listened. Someone who offered me a blanket, not a business card. Someone who asked nothing, absolutely nothing in return. Ethan looked down. That's just how I was raised. No, she said, voice firm. That's who you are. They sat in silence for a few beats. The rotors above hummed steadily, a constant presence, like time itself moving forward. Then she leaned in slightly. Do you want to know why I asked them to come back for you today? I assumed it had something to do with closure, he replied evenly. Laura shook her head. I asked them to bring you here because I realized something. When I left your cabin, it didn't feel like escaping. It felt like leaving something behind I wasn't ready to let go of. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. His eyes stayed on hers. I don't know what this is yet, Ethan. I'm not asking for anything. But I do know that the world I live in, it's noisy, fast, exhausting. And the night I spent with you and Lila with tea and old quilts and a fire made of pine wood, it felt more real than anything I've had in years. He exhaled slowly. That world doesn't exactly make room for guys like me. That's where you're wrong, she said. That world desperately needs people like you. It just doesn't know it yet. He was quiet, letting the words settle like snow on a field. Ethan, she said carefully, I'm not offering a spotlight or a stage. I'm offering partnership. Quiet, imperfect. Honest. That's a lot from someone who just left in a chopper, he said with a small smirk. Laura smiled. That was for the board. This, she gestured to the two of them, the cabin, the strange moment suspended between altitude and truth. This is for me. Ethan glanced toward the window again. His reflection stared back, weathered face gray at his temples, tired eyes, but he also saw something else now. A spark. Something like hope. I need time, he said finally. Laura nodded. You'll have it. And space. She reached across the table not to grasp his hand, but to rest her palm on the smooth surface open, waiting, not forcing. I won't take one step further than you allow. Ethan looked at her hand, then back at her face. And if I say no, then I'll respect it, she said. But I'll still be grateful for the night you saved me for who you are, and for the chance to remember who I am too. The chopper began its slow descent. The city loomed once more. But this time, it didn't feel as distant. 3 days had passed since the helicopter landed him back in Millersville. Ethan hadn't told anyone about the ride. Not the neighbors who waved at him from porches. Not the elderly veterans at the hardware store. Not even old Walt from the diner, who was usually 3 questions deep before the coffee finished brewing. He just needed time. Back home, things looked the same. The gravel driveway crunched under his boots. The woodpile still needed restacking. The cabin still creaked in the wind. And Lila still drew rainbows and stars and asked for extra syrup on her waffles. But inside, Ethan, something had shifted. He stood now in the living room holding an envelope in one hand and staring at the object on the table, an aged leather satchel. His name was embossed on a brass tag stitched onto the handle. It had arrived that morning, hand-delivered by a man in an unmarked black SUV, who said nothing except Ms. Hayes sends her regards. Ethan didn't like surprises. He liked understanding what door he was about to walk through before he crossed the threshold. He slowly unbuckled the flap and looked inside. Neatly packed inside was a bundle of documents, business plans, architectural renderings, and permits. The top page bore the name Liberty Works, a veteran-led restoration shop and community garage. Under it, a bank-certified check. Ethan stared at it for a long time. $280 or Gunmores. His fingers didn't tremble, but something inside him did. At the bottom of the check was a hand-signed notepaper clip attached. Ethan, you once said your dream was to open a place that helped more than just yourself. You wanted to fix engines and rebuild dignity, give other veterans a place to belong to, work with their hands, and walk away each day feeling useful again. I've spoken to the right people. The zoning has been fast-tracked. The building you marked in your notes, the old Baxter Tools warehouse, is now under your name. This isn't a handout. This is a yes to the dream you buried under responsibility. Let me help bring it back to life. L. He read the note twice, then folded it and placed it back into the envelope. The warehouse on Route 19. He hadn't spoken about that place in years. Not since the county priced him out of the permit fees. Not since he shelved the dream to make sure Lila had school supplies and a warm coat every winter. He stepped out onto the porch and stared at the distant horizon. His breath fogged gently in the autumn air. Pine trees danced in the breeze. Somewhere, a hawk called into the sky. Footsteps padded softly behind him. Daddy, he turned. Lila stood at the screen door, hair messy still in her pink pajamas, with stars on the knees. Morning, baby girl, he said. She stepped out and rubbed her eyes. Why are you looking at the trees like that? He chuckled. Just thinking. About Miss Laura, he paused. Yeah. How'd you know? Because you only get that face when you think about stuff that makes your heart a little happy and a little scared. Ethan crouched to her level, brushed a curl from her forehead. You're too smart for your age. I get it from Mama, she said with a grin. He nodded slowly. You do. Lila's eyes wandered to the satchel behind the screen door. Did she send that? She did. What's in it? He hesitated, then said honestly. Something that could change a lot of things, help a lot of people. Lila's expression turned thoughtful. Like how you fix that old man's truck every winter. Something like that. Yeah, she smiled. Then maybe it's Mama's way of helping us. Just from up there. Ethan's throat tightened. He looked away, blinking against the morning light. That's what she said in my dream last night, Lila added. Mama said, you're not alone. He pulled her into a hug, holding her a little longer than usual. Somewhere in the silence between them, the fear in his chest loosened. Later that day, Ethan drove down to Route 19 and parked in front of the rusted warehouse that had haunted his imagination for a decade. Baxter Tools had closed 12 years ago. The old signage was faded, but still legible. Broken glass in some windows. A worn bay door clung to one hinge. But underneath the decay, Ethan saw possibility. He walked the perimeter slowly, boots crunching over gravel and weeds. He could already see the shop lights, hear the click of socket wrenches, and hear the voices of veterans who needed more than thank you for your service gestures. They needed purpose. Inside the entryway, a yellow sticky note clung to the rusted metal door. He peeled it off, recognizing the handwriting instantly. Saw this place and thought of your story about rebuilding carburetors and confidence. Let's call it Liberty Works. You told me once that freedom isn't just about flags. It's about knowing you still matter. L. Ethan stood in the doorway a long time. Then, with slow, deliberate movement, he took out his phone and dialed the number she'd left on the back of the envelope. She answered on the second ring. I got it, he said. I hoped you would, she replied. Voice warm. He took a breath. We're going to need a good coffee machine. She laughed. Already ordered. You'll find it in the break room by Tuesday. Ethan smiled for the first time in what felt like years. The first hammer swing echoed like a promise. Ethan stood at the center of the old Baxter Tools. Warehouse sleeves rolled sweat already beating at his temples, despite the crisp fall air. The smell of sawdust, rust, and fresh coffee filled the space like incense in a chapel. Outside, a large handmade banner hung crookedly between two pine trees. Liberty Works. Grand rebuild begins. It wasn't a grand opening. Not yet. It was a beginning, and people had shown up. more than Ethan expected. A half-dozen neighbors, 2 men from the VFW post, a retired carpenter named Hank, who used to fix boats on Lake Winchester, and a young woman named Ellie, who wore overalls and combat boots, and said she liked the sound of welding torches more than TikTok. They didn't ask for explanations. They just picked up tools and went to work. That's the thing about small towns. News travels faster than trucks, and the story of a single dad, a mystery woman, and a helicopter landing near the old cabin had become something of a local legend. But it wasn't the gossip that brought them. It was the way Ethan showed up. Not with speeches, not with a marketing plan, just a toolbox, a quiet determination, and that Ethan Cole stillness that made you want to work harder beside him. By midday, the dust was flying. Hank was measuring lumber with an eye that hadn't dulled since 1974. Ellie was scraping rust off the big bay doors while humming Springsteen. Someone brought chili. Someone else brought cornbread. A teenager from the high school auto shop rode in on his bike with a bucket of old wrenches and said, "Mom said you might need these." Ethan barely knew how to thank them. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. But Laura, she had known. Somehow. You wanted a place to fix engines and rebuild dignity, her letter had said. And now it was happening. One cracked window replaced. One beam reinforced. One friendship rekindled. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge and painted the gravel yard in gold, Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and leaned against the frame of the newly installed front door. The sign over the shop still read, Baxter, but the new one, Liberty Works, was already being carved in the back by 2 veterans who insisted on doing it by hand. The sound of a familiar car crunching on gravel caught his attention. A sleek black SUV rolled in slowly, the same one that had delivered the satchel days ago. The window rolled down. Laura. She stepped out wearing jeans boots and a navy sweater. No security, no entourage. Just her and a small brown paper bag. Ethan crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. "You're late," he said. "I brought pie," she replied, holding up the bag. "Forgive me," he cracked a smile. "Depends." "What kind pecan?" "With a touch of bourbon." "You're forgiven." She handed him the bag, then looked around, taking in the sight, people lingering with drinks in solo cups. The half-painted walls, the sparks of a grinder still hissing in the corner, and the hand-lettered Tool Library sign propped against a folding chair. "It's real," she said softly. He nodded. "It is." She turned to face him. "You made it happen." He looked down at his grease-stained boots. "We did." Her smile was warm but quiet, almost reverent. "They're here because they believe in you." "No," Ethan said, voice low. "They're here because someone reminded them they still matter. That being broken doesn't mean you're finished." Laura looked away for a moment, blinking faster than usual. "Funny," she said. "I think you just summed up why I came to Millersville in the first place." They stood like that for a moment, side by side, watching the last light dip below the tree line. Then, a little voice rang out from across the yard. "Miss Laura." Lila sprinted across the gravel in her denim jacket, cheeks flushed from the cold. Laura dropped to one knee just in time to catch her in a hug. "I saved you a drawing," Lila exclaimed, pulling out a crumpled paper from her coat pocket. "It's Liberty Works, but I drew unicorns in the garage 'cause I thought they'd help people feel better." Laura laughed, pulling her close. "That's the smartest design idea I've ever heard." Ethan watched the two of them, something soft opening in his chest. Connection. Not obligation. Not noise. Just presence. Later that night, after the last drill had stopped buzzing and the final solo cup had been tossed, Ethan stood alone in the garage lights, off watching the moonlight spill through the skylight. Laura stepped up beside him, coffee in hand. Still thinking always. She sipped quietly. "You've built something powerful here, Ethan. It's not finished. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes the unfinished things are the most honest. He turned toward her, really seeing her in the quiet. Not the heiress, not the client, just Laura. You know, he said, I've had a lot of people promise me things in life. Some stayed, most didn't. I'm not most people, she said, echoing his words from their first night. He nodded slowly. No, you're not. She held out her cup in a mock toast. To rust redemption and unicorn garages. Ethan tapped his mug to hers, and to second chances. They drank in silence. Above them, the stars looked down through broken rafters, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole believed, truly, believed that something good was growing from the dust. The first headline hit on a Tuesday. Singledad's Miracle Garage, funded by secret billionaire heiress Ethan, stared at the printed page, still smelling of fresh ink and machine oil. Someone had left the newspaper on the counter at Walt's Diner, folded neatly next to the napkin holder, like an invitation he never asked for. The photo beneath the headline showed him standing in front of Liberty Works. Sleeves rolled up dust on his face. Beside him was Laura, laughing, her hand lightly on his arm. Candid, warm human. But the caption turned it into something else entirely. Sources say Laura Hayes of Everhart Global funneled private funds to local veteran and romantic scheme. Ethan folded the paper without reading the rest. At the corner booth, two regulars glanced at him, then back down at their plates. Walt gave him a small nod as if to say, I'm with you, but Ethan had seen that look before. In Fallujah, in town halls, in funeral homes, the look of someone watching from a safe distance. By Thursday, the whispers had grown teeth. At the bank, a loan officer who'd once shaken his hand with pride now hesitated behind the glass. Just need a little more documentation on the funding sources, Ethan, she said, offering a rehearsed smile. At the hardware store, someone muttered, "Sugar Mama," under their breath as he walked past. Even Lila noticed. Why did Tommy say you stole the shop, Daddy? She asked one evening, her voice. Small eyes confused. Ethan knelt beside her, hands on her tiny shoulders. Sometimes, when people don't understand something good, they try to break it. Did we do something wrong? No, baby. We did something kind. And that's never wrong. But kindness didn't stop rumor. It never had. Liberty Works felt different now. Same walls, same laughter. But beneath it all, a tension, a hesitance. Hank still showed up with his thermos. Ellie still drilled steel like it owed her money. But now they asked subtle questions. You okay with all this press? Ethan, Laura really footing the bill, huh? You think the town's jealous? Or just scared of change? He tried to shrug it off, to focus on work, to keep his promise. But inside, the old fear returned. Don't stand out too much, because when you did, the world came looking. And it didn't always like what it found. By Saturday, Ethan had stopped picking up Laura's calls. Not out of anger, out of shame. She had given him everything, and now her name was being dragged through the same mud as his boots. So when she walked into Liberty Works, unannounced, that afternoon, every nail gun hammer and belt sander stopped mid-motion. She wasn't in a suit. She wore denim and a simple green button-up. No makeup. No security. Just truth. She looked straight at Ethan and said, You should have called me. He wiped his hands on a rag, jaw tight. Didn't want to drag you into it more than I already have. Laura stepped closer. You didn't drag me into anything. I chose this. His voice was low, steady. They think I used you. And I used you, remember? At least that's what page 6 said. A reluctant smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. But it didn't last. This town, he said, they don't like what they can't label. If it doesn't fit the story, they know they make a new one. Laura's gaze was unwavering. Then let's tell them the real one. That evening, she stood on the makeshift platform in front of Liberty Works microphone in hand, surrounded by townsfolk press and veterans in worn jackets and clean-shaved pride. Ethan stood behind her arms, folded Lila by his side. Laura's voice was clear, measured, calm. I didn't come to Millersville to fund a project. I came because I needed a place that reminded me what was real, what mattered. And I found it in a mechanic's shop run by a man who didn't ask who I was, but who I wanted to be. Murmurs. Cameras clicked. She continued. Ethan didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for help. But he offered it to me, to this community, to every veteran who walks through these doors. Liberty Works isn't a vanity project. It's a vision. One built with hands, heart, and humility. She stepped back, let the silence fill the space. Then she turned to Ethan. He didn't use me, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. But I chose to stand with him. And I always will. Ethan blinked. Once. Then slowly he stepped up beside her and took the mic. I'm not good with speeches, he said. I'm better with engines. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. But I know this: when someone offers you kindness, you don't question the angle. You honor it. With work. With trust. With truth. He looked at Laura. And if anyone has a problem with that, my garage door's always open. Later, as the sun dipped low and the press cleared out, Laura and Ethan stood under the Liberty Works sign, now hung straight, lit by string lights, and surrounded by people who stayed long after the cameras left. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said. Yes, I did. I didn't want you in the line of fire. I was born in it, she said softly. But you chose to stand in it. For me. That matters. He looked at her eyes, tired but alive. You still think this is worth it? He asked. Laura reached for his hand. I think you're worth it. The lake barely stirred. It was one of those rare autumn nights when the wind forgot to move, and the surface of Stillwater Lake mirrored the sky like polished glass. The stars above were undisturbed, and so were their reflections below, anchored only by the gentle hum of crickets along the shoreline. Ethan sat on the wooden dock, boots kicked off toes grazing the cool air. The silence didn't ask anything of him. That's why he liked it. Behind him, the gravel crunched. Laura's voice, soft. Didn't think you'd sneak off without me. Ethan didn't turn, didn't sneak, just wandered. She sat beside him without asking. Her shoulder brushed his accidentally, maybe. Or maybe not. She was barefoot, too. Jeans rolled up, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands like a child hiding from the cold. For a while, neither of them said anything. And it was okay. Then Laura broke the quiet. You ever think about what your life would have looked like if... None of it had happened. He didn't need to ask what it meant. Sometimes he said. But not in a bitter way. More like watching a movie in a theater you didn't know you were in. Laura gave a small laugh. That's exactly how it feels. Like someone else wrote the script and you're just trying to remember your lines. She pulled her knees to her chest. Ethan tilted his head slightly. You talk like someone who's carrying too much. I do, she admitted. But I've gotten good at hiding it under spreadsheets and board meetings. He looked at her, really looked at the way her hair fell across her cheek, at the creases forming beneath her eyes, not from age, but from holding things in too long. You don't have to hide here, he said. Laura nodded, her voice dropping. That's the problem, Ethan. I don't know how not to hide anymore. A light breeze stirred as if the lake itself had exhaled. I lost my mother when I was 14. She continued. Heart condition. Sudden. One moment she was packing for a weekend trip, the next. She was on the kitchen floor. Ethan didn't speak. He just listened. She was the only person who made the world make sense. My father, he loved me. But he turned his grief into ambition. He built walls out of work. And I followed him in. Ethan nodded slowly. Because staying busy keeps the pain quiet. Exactly, she whispered. But it doesn't heal it. It just buries it. The moon had risen now, casting silver light on the water and their faces. The dock creaked gently beneath them. My biggest fear, she said after a long pause, is being alone in a crowded room. Being surrounded by people, but no one really seeing me. Ethan swallowed hard. Mine's different. She turned toward him attentive. I'm afraid of losing someone again, he said. Of getting too close, too comfortable, and then watching it all vanish like it did with Emily. Laura's voice was barely audible. You loved her deeply. I still do, he said simply. But I've learned love doesn't end. It just changes shape. Silence returned, not awkward, but tender. Laura laid her head gently on his shoulder, and Ethan didn't move. I don't want to pretend with you, she whispered. You don't have to. I'm scared. So am I. They sat like that for a long time. Two people not trying to fix each other, not trying to name what was growing between them, just letting it exist, letting it breathe. After a while, Laura spoke again. Do you remember the night we met in the rain? Ethan said. Hard to forget. I was terrified of the men, of being found, but mostly of being seen as weak. Ethan turned slightly to look at her. You weren't weak. You were real. There's a difference. She smiled, eyes glassy. You always say the right thing. I don't try to, he said. I just say what I know. She reached for his hand, slowly, gently, and he let her take it. Her fingers were cold, his warm, opposite, but not in conflict. Like puzzle pieces that didn't fight to fit. Under the stars with the lake, as their witness, no vows were made, no promises spoken. But something passed between them, quiet, steady, and deeply human. Back at the cabin, Lila was already asleep, her unicorn nightlight casting tiny rainbows across the walls. A crayon drawing of Liberty Works sat proudly on the nightstand, next to a photograph of Emily. Ethan tucked the blanket tighter around her. Laura stood in the doorway watching the scene. She looks so much like you, she said softly. Ethan smiled. She's got her mama's heart. They stepped back into the hallway. The cabin hushed, except for the whisper of wind outside. As Ethan walked Laura to the front door, she paused at the threshold. I don't know where this is going, she said. But I know I don't want it to stop. He nodded. Then don't. She hesitated, then rose onto her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek, brief, tender, and somehow more meaningful than anything longer. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Laura. He watched her drive off taillights disappearing into the trees. Then he looked up at the stars and breathed in the night. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like hope. The American flag waved high above the building, catching the wind, like a sail ready to carry dreams. Liberty Works was no longer just an idea, no longer just a place under renovation. It was alive. It stood proud in the Saturday sun, its metal siding gleaming with fresh paint, the bay doors open wide like arms, welcoming every soul who needed a second shot. Ethan stood out front, adjusting the cuffs of his chambray shirt. He still hadn't gotten used to the attention. Never had. But today wasn't about him. It was about the people, about the vision finally realized. Daddy, can I wear my tool belt? Lila called from the porch steps, holding the miniature brown leather belt he'd made for her last Christmas. He smiled. You better wear it. You're part of the crew now. She beamed, strapped it on over her dress, and ran to the front, handing out hand-drawn flyers that said, Fixing Things. Fixing Lives, with a rainbow under the logo. Ethan looked around the property and felt his throat tighten. Cars lined the gravel lot. Folks he'd known for years, and others he'd never seen before, filtered in and out of the new shop space. Inside, the old tool racks were filled again. Brand new hoists stood beside vintage car lifts, refurbished with care. Workbenches bore names of donors and local heroes burned into the wood. The air smelled like fresh lumber coffee diesel. And hope. He turned as footsteps approached behind him. Laura. She wore jeans and a white button-down rolled at the sleeves, simple but radiant, with her hair pulled back in a loose braid. Around her neck hung a silver pendant, shaped like a gear, a nod to Ethan's world, her world. Now, too. "You clean up all right?" she teased, nudging his elbow. He chuckled. "Only took 6.5 years in lumber." She handed him a small object, a keychain carved from walnut. On one side, Liberty Works. On the other, for those who never gave up. His jaw flexed. "You okay?" she asked, softer now. He nodded once. "Yeah, just trying to make sense of how far we've come." "I think you just showed people what was possible," she said. "And they stepped in to walk beside you." A horn honked. It was Hank arriving in his old Ford with 2 new recruits from the VFW in tow. "I better get ready," Ethan said. Laura paused, then reached for his hand. "Proud of you." Their eyes met. That quiet, unspoken knowing passed between them again. "I wouldn't be here without you," Ethan said. "You were already here," she replied. "I just helped clear the path." At noon, sharp the ribbon cutting began. The crowd gathered in a semicircle in front of the new entrance. Veterans in leather jackets stood beside mothers, pushing strollers. Business owners mingled with high schoolers from the auto class. Even the mayor, a stiff man with a fondness for paperwork, arrived wearing a Liberty Works baseball cap. Ethan stood between 2 wooden pillars, the ribbon stretched tight across them. Lila stood beside him, holding a pair of oversized scissors with both hands. Laura gave her a wink from the front row. "All right, sweetheart," Ethan said. "You ready to do the honors?" Lila nodded solemnly. 3, 2, 1. Snip. The ribbon fluttered to the ground. Applause erupted like thunder in a canyon. And just like that, Liberty Works was open. Inside, Ethan led the first tour. He spoke humbly, explaining how each station worked, how the welding corner would double as a mentoring space for teens, how the rear garage would be reserved for veterans with PTSD who needed quieter zones. "They don't just fix cars here," he said. "They rebuild themselves, too." He didn't use cue cards. He didn't need them. His voice carried not with authority, but with belief. One by one, visitors stopped asking questions and just listened, because what Ethan spoke of wasn't business. It was purpose. That evening, long after the crowd thinned and the sun dipped behind the pines, Ethan stood alone in the garage. The lights hummed overhead. Tools were hung neatly. The scent of oil and oak lingered like a memory. He ran his hand across the edge of the first workbench. It had belonged to his grandfather. It had waited 27 years in a shed, waiting for a second life. Just like him. "Mind if I join you?" He turned. Laura stood in the doorway, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. He nodded. "Always." She walked to his side, folded her arms, and took in the space. "I never thought a building could feel like a heartbeat," she said. Ethan didn't answer, but he felt it too. "It's funny," Laura continued, "for all the wealth and reach my company has, it never made a place like this." "That's because this wasn't built with money," Ethan said. "It was built with need. And need is more honest than dollars." Laura smiled. "And it lasts longer." They stood in silence, watching the final glows of the day spill through the glass. Then Laura turned to him. "You know," she said gently, "this isn't just a community space anymore." "No." She shook her head. "It's a home. And homes deserve people who stay." Ethan met her gaze. Steady. Warm. Searching. "I've been alone a long time," he admitted. Laura stepped closer. "You're not alone now." Outside, the string lights flickered on, and for the first time in years, the light inside Ethan flickered too. The letter arrived without a name, typed brief, unsigned, but the weight behind the words was unmistakable. "I heard about Liberty Works. I used to be someone before the war rewrote my brain. If there's a place for someone like me, I'd like to come home." It was postmarked from a VA shelter 2 states away. Ethan read it twice, then once more, slower. He folded it carefully, tucked it into the inside pocket of his worn denim jacket, and stepped out onto the Liberty Works lot, where a light fog was rising from the morning dew. The shop had been open 3 weeks, and the stories were already arriving faster than oil changes. Some were simple break jobs, a place to learn welding teens who just wanted something to do besides scroll their phones. Others were harder. Like James, a Vietnam vet who hadn't spoken a full sentence in 5 years, but now sat quietly, sanding reclaimed wood beside the younger guys, his hands trembling, his breathing calm. Or Camilla, a former Navy mechanic whose panic attacks silenced entire rooms. She now taught precision painting in the back room, with the big windows and lavender plants by the sill. And then there were the ones no one expected. 3 men showed up one Thursday afternoon, all in their 40s, all with the same look in their eyes and echo of things they wouldn't say, the kind of pain that wasn't loud. It just lingered like smoke in the walls. Ethan greeted them like he greeted everyone, with a handshake, a nod, and no questions. "You here to work?" They nodded. "Then welcome home." But not everyone welcomed the change. At the coffee shop, someone muttered, "That place is turning into a therapy shelter." At the town meeting, a business owner complained, "We support veterans, but some of these folks have issues." Ethan said nothing, but he heard it. Laura heard it too. "They're scared of what they don't understand," she said one night, folding pamphlets for a mental health fundraiser Liberty Works had agreed to host. "They think PTSD is a bomb waiting to go off," Ethan muttered. "They forget some of those bombs used to protect their freedom." He looked at her. "That's the thing," he said. "People don't want to see healing unless it's easy to watch." Laura paused. "So what do we do?" "We keep going." 2 days later, the test came. It was supposed to be a quiet morning. Ethan was teaching a high schooler how to change a serpentine belt when shouting erupted from the west side of the shop. "Don't touch me." It was Ray, a Marine, 3 tours, diagnosed with combat-related PTSD 2 years ago, built like a tank, hands like anvils, heart like glass. He was mid-flashback. One of the teens had dropped a metal pipe behind him. It clanged loud, sharp, too sharp. Now Ray stood shaking fists, clenched eyes wide and gone. Everyone froze. Ethan didn't. He walked slowly, calmly. No sudden moves. "Ray," he said softly. "It's me. Ethan. You're safe." Ray's breath came in gasps. He was seeing something else. Somewhere else. But Ethan had been there before. Not with Ray. With himself. "Look around," Ethan said. "No uniforms, no sand, no gunfire. Just engines. Just people who care." Ray's eyes flicked to his. Something cracked. Then broke. He dropped to his knees. Ethan was beside him in a second, arms steadying his shoulders. No shame. No scolding. Just presence. The others watched in stillness. Not fear now, but respect. Laura stepped forward, guiding the teenagers gently out, whispering, "This is what courage really looks like." Later, Ray sat on the porch steps, coffee in hand, wrapped in a blanket someone had handed him. His face was pale eyes, puffy. "I should go," he muttered. Ethan shook his head. "Not a chance. I scared the kid." "No," Ethan said. "You showed him what trauma looks like and what grace looks like too." Ray swallowed hard. I was always taught to walk it off, bottle it up. Yeah, that's how we got here, Ethan said. But Liberty Works isn't about walking away. It's about staying, even when it's hard. A pause, especially when it's hard. Ray looked at him, tears threatening again. You really mean that I built this place for you before I even knew your name? That evening, Laura found Ethan out back, leaning against the old fence, watching the sun dip low over the pines. She didn't say anything at first. Then quietly, "You handled that with more compassion than I've seen in some hospitals." "I didn't do anything special," he said. "You did the only thing that matters," she replied. "You stayed." He looked at her eyes, heavy but steady. "I'm not trying to change the world, Laura," he said. "I just want to give people a place to be human again." Laura stepped closer, voice low. "Maybe that is how you change the world." They stood side by side, silence stretching between them like a warm coat. Then, from inside the shop, Lila's voice rang out. "Miss Laura, I drew you something." Laura turned with a smile, but before she left, she placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "You gave them courage today," she said. Ethan nodded. "They gave it to me first." The diner smelled like cinnamon rolls and old stories. It was the same booth where Ethan had once sat alone weeks ago, avoiding stares and headlines after Liberty Works became the town's favorite rumor. But now the looks were different. Warmer. Nods of recognition. A few quiet thank yous. He stirred his coffee absently, watching the rain streak down the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed against the wet pavement. A soft jazz tune played from the wall-mounted jukebox, something from the 60s that probably used to annoy him, except tonight it felt right. The bell above the door jingled. She walked in. Laura. Damp curls tucked behind one-eared dark green scarf over her navy peacoat cheeks, pink from the chill. And that same calm presence, like she carried stillness with her wherever she went. She spotted him instantly and gave a tired, radiant smile. He stood without thinking, and for a second, they just looked at each other. "Cold out there," he said, as she slid into the booth across from him. "I've been through worse," she teased. He nodded to the waitress. "2 decafs. 1 slice of the good kind." Laura raised a brow. "You remembered pecan pie with sea salt on top," he said. "Some things are worth remembering." Their drinks came. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was familiar. The kind of quiet you could build a home inside. Laura finally leaned forward, both hands wrapped around her mug. "Everything okay at the shop?" "Better than okay," Ethan said. "Camilla's teaching 2 teens how to airbrush designs. Hank built a custom stool for James, who now grunts instead of just nodding. And Ray," he smiled faintly. "Ray brought donuts yesterday." Laura laughed gently. "That's practically a love letter." "I think it was." She grew quiet, her fingers tracing the rim of the mug. "I've been meaning to say something." Ethan nodded once. "Me too." But she spoke first. "I've spent my whole life being in charge. Of people, companies, expectations. And somewhere along the way, I stopped remembering what it felt like to just be." Ethan waited. "But when I'm with you," she continued, "I don't have to perform. I don't have to impress. I just get to exist. And be seen. Really seen." She looked up. "And I want more of that. Not because I'm lonely, not because I'm grateful, but because I care." The honesty in her voice was like a warm light breaking through years of guarded cloud. Ethan let it settle before he answered. "I loved once," he said. "Deeply. And when I lost Emily, I promised myself I wouldn't feel that kind of pain again." Laura's expression softened. "But I also didn't expect to feel what I feel." Now he added, "I didn't expect you." His hand moved slow and deliberate across the table. Laura met it. They sat like that for a long time, two people who had seen the worst of the world, now holding something unexpectedly tender between them. Not perfect, but real. Later that night, the rain still falling, Ethan walked Laura to her car. The diner's neon sign cast a pink hue across the sidewalk. She paused by the door, fingers on the handle. "You sure about this?" she asked. Not teasing, not testing, just confirming. Ethan stepped closer. "I'm sure about you." Then quietly, gently, like a question whispered against the wind, he kissed her. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't fireworks. It was steadier than that. It was the kind of kiss that said, "I'm not going anywhere." When they broke apart, she smiled, forehead resting against his. "You're going to make me believe in good men again." Ethan kissed her temple. "Then I'm already doing my job." Back at the cabin, Lila had fallen asleep in the armchair, a book open on her chest, and one of Ethan's sweatshirts bundled around her shoulders. Laura tucked the blanket in tighter, brushing a curl from the little girl's forehead. "She trusts you," Ethan said from the doorway. "I trust her too," Laura replied. "She has your steadiness." "And your stubbornness," he grinned. They laughed quietly. Then Laura turned serious again. "You know this won't be easy. I have a life in another world. One with meetings and headlines, and 1,000 responsibilities. And you have this place, roots, people mission." Ethan nodded. "We'll figure it out." Her brow lifted. Just like that, he stepped closer, took both her hands in his. "I've learned that sometimes life brings you the right person at the wrong time. And when it does, you don't push them away. You build a new time together." She blinked back, the sudden gloss in her eyes. "Ethan Cole," she whispered, "are you asking me for something tonight?" he said. "Tonight I'm just letting you know I'm in." She kissed him again, longer this time, deeper. The fireplace crackled behind them. Rain tapped gently on the windows. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside the cabin, two hearts had finally aligned. 5 years later, Liberty Works didn't just fix things. It grew things. Out front, the once gravel lot was now a community garden planted and maintained by veteran students and volunteers. Tomatoes thrived beside tool sheds. Wildflowers bloomed next to tire racks. Hope, quite literally, had taken root. Ethan stood beneath the wooden sign, still carved by hand, still slightly crooked, that read, "Liberty Works, for those who never gave up." He wore the same flannel shirt he always did when things mattered. Lila, now 13, taller and sharper, and still carrying the same fearless fire in her eyes, stood beside him. "You ready?" he asked. She adjusted her ponytail, took a breath, and nodded. "Ready." Inside the shop buzzed with quiet excitement. Today wasn't about grand openings or ribbon cuttings. It was something different, something deeper. It was the day Liberty Works officially opened its second wing, a full-scale veteran mental wellness and job reintegration center, designed by Laura, built by the people it was meant to serve, and funded by a quiet mix of Everhart Foundation support and small-town fundraising barbecues, a miracle born of kindness, grit, and second chances. Ethan stepped to the front of the gathered crowd. Not a podium, just a crate, and a microphone that squeaked once before settling into silence. "Some of you were here when we opened that first garage door," he began, voice slow and grounded. "We didn't know if anyone would show up. We didn't know if we could make it last." He looked around the room at Ray, now mentoring new arrivals, at Camilla, who ran the trauma recovery yoga sessions, at Hank, leaning on his cane, nodding like a proud uncle. "But you all showed up anyway," Ethan continued. "And this place became something none of us could have imagined." He paused, then turned to Laura, and it started because one person saw something worth saving, not in this building, but in people. A wave of warm applause rippled through the room. Laura smiled gently, but didn't step forward. She just watched him, the way a lighthouse watches the shore. Later that evening, long after the chairs were folded, and the last batch of donated cookies had been wrapped in foil, Ethan sat on the porch steps of the cabin. The sun was beginning to set. That soft kind of golden that only autumn in Millersville could conjure. Behind him, through the open door, came the muffled laughter of Lila and Laura in the kitchen. He took a long breath, not because he was tired, but because it felt good to stop and feel everything. Years ago, he would have sat here alone, convincing himself he didn't need anything more than the quiet. Now the quiet was still there, but so was the fullness. Footsteps joined him. He didn't need to look. Laura sat beside him, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "No coffee tonight?" he asked, smiling. "Tea soothes the soul," she replied. "Besides, we're not rebuilding transmissions at 9 p.m. They clinked mugs, sipped, watched the sky darken to a canvas of stars. "I was thinking," she said, "we should take a few days off. Go up to the mountains." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You taking a break? I know, shocking." She smirked. "But I've come to appreciate slowing down." "You've come a long way," he said. "We both have." She leaned her head on his shoulder, warm and natural, like it had always belonged there. "I used to think power meant control," she whispered. "Now I think it means choosing peace when you don't have to." Ethan nodded. "And choosing love when it scares you." She turned to him. "Are you still scared?" He looked into her eyes, steady, open, honest. "No," he said. "Not anymore." They sat like that, watching the stars blink awake. Inside, Lila had found an old photo tucked between pages of her dad's tool manual. It showed Ethan younger, with a woman whose smile was pure, light Emily. Lila traced the edges of the photo with her fingertip. Then she carefully placed it on the mantel beside a new photo, Ethan, Laura, and her laughing in front of Liberty Works grease on their clothes and joy in their eyes. 2 lives. 2 loves. 1 family. In the years to come, Liberty Works would grow. It would inspire similar centers in other towns. It would be featured in a few magazines. It would be misunderstood by some and deeply cherished by many. But more importantly, it would never forget where it started. A rainy night, a stranger in need, a man who didn't hesitate, a little girl who believed her mom was still watching from above. And sometimes when new visitors arrived and asked how it all began, they were told the same simple story. A single dad stopped for someone in the rain, and kindness did the rest. Kindness is the seed of miracles, and sometimes 1 quiet night can change a lifetime. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. It's always a joy to see how far kindness and storytelling can reach. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story for more uplifting tales of love, hope, and second chances. Thank you truly for spending time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in quiet miracles.